Good afternoon, all. Nice to see some of you coming on. Looks like we're still just waiting on a few more people, so we'll just give it a few seconds for everyone to get in, and we'll make a start. Got quite a few of you on actually, and a really nice mix of members too. So hopefully we'll get some nice questions from you and a bit of engagement from you. Yeah, looks like we're getting a few more come through, so we'll make a start then, if that's okay. So good afternoon. Just wanted to welcome you all to this year's awards workshop. Really delighted actually to have so many of you join us today, especially on this virtual platform. And for those of you that I've not met or spoken to with before, my name's Emily Feeney and I'm the events project manager here at Bartley. So I'm responsible primarily for the National Landscape Awards, and I'll be presenting today alongside Chair of the Judging Panel, John Melmo, and fellow judge Jason Locke. This workshop has been developed by those two judges and myself to provide you with lots of insight into the judging process, as well as some hints and tips on how to create a successful entry. But before we get started, as with all of these online platforms, I just wanted to take you through a couple of housekeeping points really. So the workshop is being recorded today, so that'll allow us to share this with those that are unable to attend, and they can review it on demand. But it will also allow those of you who are in attendance now to be able to review the information and look back on it again, which will hopefully help support that entry process for you. We're also going to have a Q&A session at the end of the workshop. So if you've got any questions as the presentation progresses, there is a question box that you should see on your screen within the control panel. So type them in there, and once we reach the Q&A session at the end, they'll be read out and the judges will get those answered. Just to note, we will be waiting until the end of the presentation though to answer any questions that come up, but we will get through them all. The judges will answer them all, and we'll also make them available as well as a downloadable document for you, so you've got those. So just wanted to start, now that the housekeeping part's over, we can move on and start with the agenda. So I'll take you through a short introduction to the awards, why entering's important to you and your company, and some exciting opportunities as well that we've got in 2021, and also how to enter. I'm then going to pass over to John and to Jason, who will cover what you should be including within your submission pack, the judging criteria and the score reports for each category, and also some really simple steps to follow when submitting your entry or your entries if you've got multiple, and some hints and tips as well to ensure all your photography and videos are all top notch. So introduction wise, to kick things off, I wanted to start with just a short introduction to the awards. A lot of you probably are really familiar with them, but it's now in its 45th year, and the awards started from really humble, very humble beginnings, and have grown phenomenally over the last 45 years, thanks in the most part to the commitment of all of our members. And they've grown to become the largest landscape awards now in Europe. This growth has seen the introduction of lots of new categories, and categories that we feel really represent the whole of the landscaping industry. They're also reviewed each year as well to ensure that they stay relevant, and if we need to, we can then start making changes to categories year on year to kind of reflect any changes then that are happening within the industry. The growth then also means that winning a National Landscape Award promises to change the way, obviously, that you and your business are perceived. Members continue to enter because they do find benefit in doing so. So whether that's increased promotion or simply a way of just being able to celebrate the wonderful work that you and your staff continue to achieve. So the big question, why enter the awards? So the entry process does take thought, it does take consideration, time and money, but the benefits most definitely outweigh this. First and foremost, it showcases and highlights your commitment to excellence, not just within the industry, but it shows it to the general public and to your clients as well. Certainly one of the biggest surprises I had when I first started working on the awards was the hunger that I saw from members to gain feedback from their industry peers. So whether that was judges visiting and reviewing their schemes and entries, or just from other members who saw their winning entries up on a big screen at the ceremony. From that, it also made me see their commitment as well to ensure they're always learning, always moving forward, pushing themselves and their teams to do more, and in turn the engagement of staff within their business also really increases. Lots of winners have reported an increase in inquiries after winning an award, but one statistic I heard and I thought was just absolutely staggering was that they saw an increase of inquiries of 24%. And to me, it just highlights one of the great benefits of entering. So of course, winning an award also generates many additional promotional opportunities for you and your company. We work with our winners year on year to ensure that we gain as much coverage within the industry as possible. And there's just kind of a number of examples there for you to have a look over. And as I say, we do review that year on year. It's something that we continue to develop and to change where the industry changes and publications and platforms change. We also change with them. And so this year we've got some really exciting, we've been working behind the scenes to create some really exciting opportunities for you this year. The first being that for our registered contractors, our group members and our DSO members, as well as our international and designer members, we've extended the practical completion date from 12 months to 24 months. So this really was a direct reflection of the pandemic that we found ourselves in and still are. While speaking with members throughout the course of the entry process last year, we know that there were many of you who were just simply unable, and understandably so, to be able to juggle the changes that needed to take place within the business and also then find time to submit an entry. So it means the number of schemes now eligible for entry has increased. So please do remember that if you've got multiple entries to submit, you do receive a discount for this as well. And it's also important to note that for this change, for this extension, it is for this year only. Secondly, we've introduced a new category, so nature conservation and biodiversity enhancement. We've worked with members and listened to feedback from you all, and we know how important this subject is to you and the industry and globally, and felt it was really important that the awards reflected this change, which is why we've incorporated it this year. And finally, we've launched a new entry system, one that I certainly believe is far simpler to use and manage your entries. But it also means that you're now able to upload your submission packs online via the new entry system. So again, we're really conscious of the environmental impact of printing and providing hard copies of a submission pack, which can certainly in some cases be a huge document, which is why this is something we've been wanting to introduce for some time. But realise the importance of it in particular this year, as we're aware that some people are still working from home, their teams remain working from home, and that creating a hard copy submission pack just isn't really ideal currently. And this brings us nicely really into our next slide, which details how you can enter. So the entry process is a simple one. And firstly, it's really important to ensure that you've reviewed and checked eligibility against the entry guidelines document, which can be found on the awards website. But once you've done that and you're ready to start your entry, there's a link taking you through to the entry system on the home page of the website, and it's also there in the category sections for you as well. So you'll first be asked to register through the entry system, and once you've done so, you can then make a start on your entry. So you can easily pick your category and it'll take you through the entry questions in various stages. Top tip for you though is to collate all of that information that you need to start prior to starting your online entry. What we've created, we started it last year and it worked really well, is you can now download the entry questions. So we've created a really simple Word document with all the entry questions on, so you can gather up all of that information in advance and you can download that document from the FAQ section on the website. Once you've completed the online entry, the final section is for your submission pack. And if you wish to upload it online, you simply click yes when prompted and start uploading your content. I'd strongly recommend when you upload the documents though, you do it in sections, just as if you were completing a hard copy submission pack, and just ensure that they're all labelled correctly and accordingly as well. And if you're providing a hard copy submission pack, you just simply click no in that section and move on to submit your entry. So whether you're submitting online or a hard copy, ensure you've reviewed what to include in the pack. And again, details of that will be discussed today, but they're also within the entry guidelines document as well. And finally, the next step would be payment for your entry. That can either be made through the entry system, or you can request an invoice instead if you prefer to use that method. But throughout any of the entry process, if you've got any questions at all, you can just give me a call or drop me an email and I would be more than happy to help. So we're now moving on really to talk more in depth about the requirements for each category, and I'm pleased to be able to introduce John Melmo for this, Chair of the Judging Panel, so he will take over from here.
Yes, good afternoon everybody, and thank you for joining us in this workshop. Some people find the first time entry is to be a rather daunting task, and today what we're trying to do is show you actually how simple the whole process is. We're here to guide you, we're here to help you, so at any stage, as Emily has said, that you need to bounce an idea or check a fact or a figure, please come through to Emily in the first instance, and then that will be referred out to one of the fellow judges as appropriate to give you the assistance that you need. For the smaller companies, there's also quite a cost, both in time and in effort, for submitting this entry. If you prepare correctly and wisely, you can actually use the presentation as part of your company marketing strategy. So it's not just a one-off cost for entering the Barley Awards. You can actually use the documents for your general day-to-day promotion of your business, for client information, etc. So the items that are required for the submissions are items that you would use on a daily basis: good photography, information about previous schemes, etc. So please don't think that there's a huge cost that in entering these awards. Use it wisely and use the information that you gather for your promotion, for your submission of schemes, etc., throughout your day-to-day running of your business. The entry guidelines are exceptionally clear, we believe. We refine them each year as to go on, and they vary from category to category very slightly. Here you have this information is information that's required for various categories. Evidence of practical completion, a detailed specification. A detailed specification on the larger schemes will be quite extensive. On a smaller private scheme, it may simply be an extract from your quotation saying really what your works are about. Evidence of hidden work, but always, as you're coming through building your schemes and your projects, take information and photographs as you come through. And Jason will touch upon the importance of these for, later on in the workshop. But build the picture. The thing about the awards is it's a selling job. You have to sell your scheme to the judges. To the judge that visits, you need to capture their imagination. So it's very important, your submission document, hugely important, that it jumps out and it's slightly different than the others and it gains the imagination of the judge. The judge has to then return and sell your scheme to the panel of judges. It's not one judge that decides the outcome of this, it's a panel, it's a joint decision. But you need to feed in the information that actually enables your visiting judge to sell your scheme or project to the panel. So build the picture. A lot of hidden works, and we'll touch on some of these as we come through, but a lot of the time you don't see all the effort that goes into the foundations, the setting out details, etc. So capture these as you come through and prepare your presentation and your submission, and build the picture. Good, clean drawings are essential and of a manageable size. Financial summary can be a detailed bill of quantities, it can be a copy of your invoice or quotation. It doesn't have to be a huge bill of quantities. If the scheme dictates that it's necessary, then fine, submit it. Very, very high quality photographs. Jason will cover this, but the images are everything. The quality of them, etc., is paramount. And then clear location and access details are required. So the information, again, is slightly different for design works, etc. And Jason will talk you through this in detail. But again, some of the information crosses over from category to category, but it's quality, good quality information, clear, not full of flannel and fluff. You know, keep it concise, be precise and concise with your submission. Explain the complexity of the schemes, your quality of the workmanship, the choice and use of materials, etc. All these items are teased out within the actual entry guidelines. So read them through first, collate the information as Emily says, and then start preparing your submission. Explain any use of innovation and technology, environmental impacts, etc. And then the strong design and implementation of that design. And Jason, who specialises in design, will talk you through this in more detail. So we're moving on now, and we'll just share with you some of the elements that the judges are looking for when they visit the site. Each scheme, except categories 3A and 3B, will be visited by the judge. And I think I'd like to just take this opportunity of thanking the judging panel through last year, through the COVID lockdown, etc., for still managing to visit all the sites. And you know, an awful lot of effort went into ensuring that the Barley Awards happened last year. And a lot of effort was there behind the scenes from the judging panel to ensure it happened. So the types of things, this is just a crib sheet to help the judge when he's coming. He's looking for the quality of the entry material, quality of materials on site, obviously the quality of workmanship, project management, the complexity of the scheme, how you went about it, quality of planting, the environmental factors, etc. And these are elements plus the other items there are just given us a score just as an aid memoir for the judge whilst they're on site or just shortly after they leave your project. They'll be sitting in the car or on the train and they'll be filling this out and making copious notes ready for the adjudication process later in the summer. So this isn't an extensive score sheet. This is basically the outline of the elements that the judges are looking for. And then the judges as a panel will view your scheme at the adjudication process at the end of August. So moving on to the next slide. And this is where I hand you over to Jason, who will talk you through the design elements of the scheme and the importance of what he's looking for.
Thanks, John. Well, good afternoon, everybody. I'm just going to talk you through the design excellence section of the awards. So 2A to 2C, that's projects under 50,000. 2B is projects between 50 and 100,000, and 2C projects over 100,000. So really what we're looking for, as John's alluded to on some of the previous slides, we're looking at clear information. So we want a really good information about the description of the project. So it's a really clear client brief, you know, what you set out to do, what the client wanted you to do to achieve the scheme that you're submitting. So we need to be able to see clear evidence that the brief has been met. You know, that's an absolute key thing for any design project. We also want to understand the scope of the contract. You know, what if it's a complete garden, whether it's part of a garden, we would need to understand the exact scope of the scheme, and then how you've met or exceeded the client expectations. In the past, when I visited projects that I've been judging, clients have been there and they've actually sort of been very effusive about you know, the work that's been done, and it's been really good to hear. Or there's been letters that have been written to the designer who's submitting the scheme, or emails, and it sets out how the project was exceeded in terms of their expectations and the client brief. So all that information is really, really important. Obviously, we need to see evidence of practical completion, so when the whole project was completed. And like with the other schemes, we want to see a specification or tender specification so we can understand what it was that was set out to achieve. But again, like, you know, John's already alluded to, any unusual features or unexpected problems and how you overcome them. That's really important to understand that, whether it's a written evidence of those particular things, but also photographically. If you've come across, you know, a number of times we've had projects where there've been, you know, unexpected wells, or, you know, you've had to reroute drains, or all those sorts of things. You know, we need to understand what they are. We can't see that from a finished project. The only way that we can see that is if that's been evidenced through photographic information that details the extent you had to go to. It might be that there was extra works and you detail out those extra works. Which leads nicely into underground works. You know, if there are extensive drainage, pipe work, anything that we won't be able to see when we're visiting, we need to have that evidence. So whether that's through detailed schematic drawings, or, you know, ideally photographs is the best thing. I will touch on all the photographs and what we're expecting a bit later on in the slides, but you know, they are really, really important. The other thing is, if there's any works that have been undertaken by third parties, so it might be that as part of your design submission, you had some visuals done, but it was done by a third party, you know, that's fine. It's absolutely fine, because it gets across what you wanted to achieve for your clients, but we need to know that it was undertaken by a third party and not done by you. And likewise with the physical works on the ground, if there were third-party works that were undertaken, we'll then make sure that is absolutely crystal clear, because the last thing what we don't want to happen is for us to think that all that work was done by the same contractor. We need to understand who did what work. It just builds the picture and makes us understand more about the project. Financial summary, yes, like every other project, we need to understand what the costs were involved. We need to understand how that relates to the project, and whether, as part of our judging process, we look at, whether something we feel was value for money in terms of the costs based on what was achieved and what was delivered. One thing that we haven't said with the supporting information is that it would be really useful to understand what the design fee costs were, rather than just the physical cost of undertaking the work, but the design fee costs. That helps us understand, again, if you've put an awful lot of effort and time into the project from a design point of view, but the design fee is relatively low, we need to understand that, because obviously that doesn't represent good value for money for you as a designer. Obviously it does for the client, but that's something we really need to understand. Videos supporting submission, you don't necessarily need to have a video, but videos are always good, because it details out what's been done. I mean, I've seen projects before where companies have used time-lapse video photography for a project, and actually it really does sell the scheme in terms of the adversity that they went through in terms of weather, or whether they had to work through the night. Some projects they do, and so that really helps to understand the whole project. And also we need a location map of the scheme. There's nothing worse than not being able to find it, or you get the address of the designer rather than where the project is. At the end of the day, we've often got 4 or 5 projects we're seeing in a day. We need to be able to get to the project in a timely manner, so we need to know exactly where it is. Next slide, please, Emily. So looking at the judging criteria, I mean, obviously from a design point of view, I'm going to go on site, I'm going to have a good look at the design beforehand, get a feel for the scheme, how the design works, whether it's balanced, whether I feel that there's good use of space within the design. And then when I get to site, I'm going to see how that translates on the ground. And for me, if you walk into a scheme and it feels right, it generally is right. And then if that's the case, then really what we're going to start looking at is looking at the planting, the compositions, whether that's right, whether we feel the planting is at its stage in its life cycle is being planted with enough space to grow, whether it's planted too tight, whether there's too much distance between the plants. So we'll start to get a feel for whether that is right and whether it's right for the soils. But we also want to look at the detailing, from the initial design. How is that translated on the ground? Has it worked? Have the details that the designer was hoping to achieve, has that worked on the ground? Those are all the things we're looking at. But then we're also looking at the quality of the finish. Okay, that's not necessarily how you as a designer would portray it on a plan, but it's all part of the process. We need to understand, as a designer who's perhaps been looking after the site during its build, have you kept on top of the quality of the construction? How does that look on site? Have you picked up on all the little nuances of a really good quality scheme? So we're looking at pointing, we're looking at the way the paving has been laid, we're looking at junctions between materials, we're looking at edgings, all those things. We're looking at the detail and how everything's been finished. And it may seem pedantic, but we're wanting to make sure that if we push your scheme, if I'm pushing your scheme to the panel, as John said, it's not just down to me. If I'm pushing your scheme to the panel, I want to be confident that I'm pushing the very best scheme forward for that particular category, because yours won't be the only one. There could be 5 or 6 others. So I've got to, fight my corner for that scheme. So I've got to be confident that the quality and the detail, the attention to detail, and the intent and the brief that you were set has been met and some, to make sure that scheme goes through. So that's what we're looking for. And then I suppose an overall, it's how the scheme fits in. Is it appropriate for the site? Does it fit with the environment? I mean, it's no good having a scheme which is really out of kilter with the vernacular of the house. It will jar. But that's again where it's important that the information that you provide. If a client has been very, very specific about what they want, and therefore you've delivered exactly what they want, we've got to take that into consideration. But if that information isn't there and we're just looking at it and thinking, well, yeah, designer's done this because that's what they wanted to do, then obviously we can't, we've got to judge it as we see it. Make sure all the documentation is scaled, it's all detailed, and we've got appropriate drawings. Don't just give us every single drawing that you've produced. They've got to be relevant to what we need to look at. Scope of works and specifications, they need to be included, and also any additional documentation which might have been provided by your consultant structural engineers. It's all important. So any of those third-party people that are featured on the scheme, we need to make sure we've got all that information as well. Next slide, please, Emily. So just in simple steps, explain your project, make sure you've got practical completion, detailed specification, evidence of hidden work. So that's, primarily through photography. We need to make sure that we've got that detailed. Clearly define any of the works that are undertaken by third parties. Make sure you include all that information. Clean copies of relevant drawings. I mean, you would not believe, I've opened up schemes before and somebody's footprint has been on a plan. So just make sure that you've got clean copies. A3 is preferable, A1 plans, if we've got them outside, they just blow all over the place. Good financial summary, including design fees, and then photography. I'll talk more about that a little bit later, but make sure we've got good quality, high resolution photography. We'll take our own photographs as well, but it all just sets the scene, and make sure we've got very clear, detailed information of how we can get to site, what the access requirements are, who the contact details are, and also importantly, if there's holidays booked for your clients or for you, make sure that's detailed so that we can work around that. That should all go swimmingly well if all those details are met. And I'll hand over to John now for the next set of slides.
Thank you, Jason. The importance of the submission pack It's vital. Last year we had 2 brilliant schemes, absolutely superb, and we couldn't tell them apart on site from the quality of the workmanship. They were so tightly grouped. And then we won't go back to the submission pack, and one submission pack was far more detailed than the other. And it was on the submission pack as much as on site that the actual winner was concluded in a particular category and section. So the importance of the submission pack is well, I can't express it enough, quite frankly. Each year the quality goes up and up of the submission packs, and we do take them seriously. They really set the scene. I think as a company, you can really actually form some good bonds with your staff in involving them in preparing these packs. I know it may fall down to a receptionist, a secretary, or contracts manager to actually pull them together, but the more people that feed into them from the ground up, the better the actual submission packs generally be. There are 9 simple steps, 9 very simple steps to actually to fulfill the requirements for the submission. The first one is, step 1 is the introduction. Explain your scheme. If it's got history, give a bit of history. Don't go pages and pages of history, but set the scene. As we've said previously, we have to sell this to the panel. And therefore, if you can set us the scene, we can set the scene of the project to the panel, and we can start building the enthusiasm for the scheme. So step 1 is the introduction. Explain the project, give the background, keep it succinct, a few photographs in there to explain it, and then we go on to the next step. Evidence of practical completion. Now, practical completion on complex projects will be a formal certificate. It's a contractual document to actually say and state the date that it was completed on and the defects liability period, etc., etc. On private works, often practical completion certificates aren't issued. So the practical completion certificate might be your final invoice, or it might be a letter to your client stating that the scheme has been handed over and therefore it was practically complete on a particular date. We need this because this year you've got some leeway with the 24 months practical completion period being extended. Normally the 12 months practical completion period is quite strict, and it actually drives out a lot of issues. So we do need evidence that the date is that the scheme was completed on, practically complete, must be forwarded as part of the submission documents. Then we move on to step 3. Step 3 is the detailed specification. Now, on the bigger schemes, this could be 100 pages and etc. On smaller projects, it won't be as complicated. Don't try and dress it up. Don't try and make the scheme seem more complicated than it is or more detailed than it is. Say it as it is. If it's a simple 1-page scope of work document, then that's what it is. That's what it is. That's what you'd be judged against. That's what the scheme will be judged against. If it's a 200-page detailed specification, then the scheme is obviously complex and it will be judged accordingly. So the detailed specification, don't pad it out, just put it in as it is seen and as you were assigned to, contracted to deliver the scheme. And we move on to step 4. Step 4, as Jason said, is to give the evidence of hidden work. A lot of the time we come and we look at the finished product and the contractor neglects really to show all the work and thought process that has gone into the works beforehand. This, to us as the judging panel is great assistance, because it tells us how complicated the elements were and how well thought out the construction process and programming issues were thought through, and the problems that you've overcome as contractors. So it is important that the evidence is shown and that you build the picture. Let us build the picture and we can then sell your project to the panel. Step 5. This is Jason's stated this already. If there's works done by a third party, then clearly identify that the works were done by a third party. Don't try and claim the false horizon of some of the works. Tell it as it is. What did you do? We don't want to know what the main contractor did or the building contractor. We want to know what your elements of works were. So clearly define it. Do a red line drawing if necessary. Whatever you need to do to actually evidence and show the works that were carried out by others. It's really, really important, because every scheme will be visited and every scheme will be interrogated. So we will actually find out what elements of work were undertaken and what fell into your scope of works and what didn't. So just be very clear and upfront when you're with your submission. And that takes us on to step 6. Manageable size drawings. Make sure that the drawings are manageable. Jason's already said AOs end up being blown around the site. Clean, succinct drawings in a nice tidy package is all that's required. And it's a range, it's a flavour for the key elements. If your scheme has got 10 drawings or 100 drawings, you know, 10 is a manageable number. 100, come on, you know, we don't need that level of information. Give us some good representative samples of the drawings that you're involved with, some good cross sections, some good detailing, etc. But we don't need 200 planting plans, all of different planting beds. Just give us a flavour. This takes us on to step 7. Now you're seeing as we come through that we've got some very simple building blocks for this submission. And this is one of the building blocks, is the financial summary. This could be a complete bill of works, a bill of quantities. That's not a problem, we can cope with that. Or it might be a one-page quotation to your client. It really doesn't matter. Just submit what you've been contracted and assigned to do. That's the key. Don't go hunting it out thinking I need padding to make this look bigger than it actually is. Just say it as it is. Produce and submit what you were contracted to do. This leads us on to step 8. Jason will touch upon this, but I can assure you that the key to these submissions, a very high degree of attention is required to the quality of the images that you submit. You know, please, if you can afford it, get them done professionally. And look for the hero image. The hero image never dates. The hero image will always be there and it will become iconic in time. The one on the right hand side is taken in the late 70s. So that hasn't dated. That is still there. The building's still there, it's still iconic. So the quality of that image taken by actually a landscape architect will carry through. It's timeless. So invest, if you can afford it, invest in professional photography. Which leads us on to step 9. Clear access details. If you've got to get security clearance to get us onto site, then please apply in good time. If it means making a meeting with Mrs. Jones to let us into the garden, then make the appointments in good time and feed the information back to the judging panel or the judges when they make their visits. But clear information. 4, 5, 6 schemes in a day is not unusual for the judging panel. And if they go to the wrong location or etc., you get them on the back foot to start with. You know, make it seamless. Make it seamless. Think through what you actually need to tell and arrange. And if it's Mrs. Jones is only available on a Friday, well, so be it. Make sure that's known at the time of your submission, and the judges will flex accordingly. So there's the process. Having got through your 9 simple steps, you now have submitted your scheme. And the scheme this year will be either uploaded or in hard copy, as Emily alluded to. And what will happens then is that these get collated in the early June, and your schemes will get allocated to a judge. And it's a judge who is deemed to have the experience for your particular category, be it design, be it commercial, be it private scheme, etc. And these are done geographically throughout the country, and there's judges based in different locations in the country. But the package then is assigned to the judge. There's a conflict of interest test done to make sure that none of the clients or the contractors, the judges have got a conflict with the client and or contractor and or scheme. And if there is a conflict, the judge will assign the pack will pass it over to another judge. The visits are arranged with you, and the clients are encouraged to be present if applicable. And then having made the date for the appointment, and the judge will turn up at the agreed time, allocated time, and will ask you to take them through the scheme. And that is an extremely one-to-one opportunity for you explaining to the judge exactly what's involved. He's already will have read your submission pack, so you don't have to go through that verbatim because he's already been through it. But it will give him a flavour for all the challenges that you might not have captured in your submission. In theory, you should have captured everything. If you prepared it correctly, you should have captured all of those 9 steps, which tells the story of your project. So the visit is undertaken and your scheme is scored. And then at the end of August, all the judges meet for adjudication meeting, which can take several days. And each scheme is debated. And the debates can be quite lively. And obviously at that stage, your quality of your submission is on view to all the judging panel, and it's debated and discussed, and eventually it's awarded or not, as the case may be. So very good, clear information is required, and a good, clear submission pack. So I'll now hand you back to Jason, who will talk you through the importance of the photography, videos, etc. I'll hand over to Jason now to take you through it.
Right, hi everybody again. Yeah, so on to photography. As John said, and I've said throughout the presentation, photography is key. I mean, obviously we're going to be visiting the site, so we'll be able to see it firsthand, but depending on when we visit, I mean, for example, if we don't visit till August and if we get a really hot summer, the garden might not be quite looking at its best because of severe weather. So if we've got a good set of photographs beforehand, then obviously we can get a much better feel for how the garden should look as opposed to its sort of drought-induced state. But photographs are important. Make sure the compositions are good. Make sure that they're a good high resolution, and also that they tell the story. As we've said before, if there's things, particular details, particular issues with hidden obstructions on site, make sure that those are all evidenced so that we can see them. The other thing that's really important is if you're doing a selection of sort of before and after photographs, which, on certain categories are absolutely critical for us to be able to see those, try, if possible, to take the photograph from the same angle. So, for example, as you can see on the screen, there's a picture of one of Rosemary Coldstream's projects, which I visited last year in Hertfordshire. Now, whilst we haven't got that photograph to hand, there is a photograph that she took that was almost exactly the same angle. And if you've got a series of photographs from the site, which illustrate maybe how it was before you started, partway through construction, and then completion. That tells us quite a lot in terms of how the project has moved on, and the scope of the project, and how that's evolved. So photographs, we can't express enough how important photographs are. And as you'll see, that there are certain categories that we do need before and after photographs, so that's really important. We will be on site, so we will take our own photographs, but in terms of your own photography, particularly for, as John said right at the very beginning, the importance of these awards is that you can use them as a marketing tool. You can bundle up these projects as sort of to showcase the work that you can do. So the photographs are important for you to use historically and moving forward, for your own marketing purposes. So good before and after photographs are good, but make sure you choose the right compositions. Really focus in on the hero shots, as John said. I mean, for example, this shot at PWP Landscape Design up in Yorkshire. I mean, it's a really evocative photograph. You've got a path leading through the pergola. Good array of planting. So good photography, will last years and years. You can use them on your website, your marketing material, any brochures, adverts that you want to put out, Instagram, Facebook. They can be used in a number of different ways. If you can afford to get professional photography, just don't hesitate, do it. It'd be well worth the money. But otherwise, photography you can do yourselves. An iPhone takes brilliant photographs. You don't need to have fancy photography equipment. That's what you need to do. But also, just thinking about your photographs, dress the site if you can. Like in this particular shot, they've dressed it. They put some nice cushions out. They've put candles. Maybe a bottle of wine. Maybe even if you have somebody using the garden, you have your clients in there sitting at a table. It brings the whole picture to life. Pictures that don't have those things can be quite sterile. It's not very inviting. So, dress your photographs. Give that real lifestyle element, and those photographs will sell your company, for many years to come on however you decide to use them. And the other thing to think about, next slide, please, Emily, is time of day. Clearly, if you talk to any photographer, early morning, early evening, dawn and dusk, they're the best times to get photography. The light tends to be the best. Midday, the sun's too bright in the sky, you get too much reflected light, and often photographs can look quite bleached. So try and get your photographs first thing in the morning and last thing at night. And particularly if you've got a lot of garden lighting in your schemes, and it's an important part of the project, maybe an important part of the design, as well as an important aspect of the construction, get photographs of it. The number of times that people have said to us, oh yeah, and by the way, the garden's got loads of lighting in it and this looks great at night, but those photographs aren't submitted. We've got no way of knowing how brilliant the lighting is if you don't submit those photographs. And often we're asking for photography to be submitted after the event, but we need to see that at the outset so that we can assess it whilst we're on site. We don't have the luxury of being able to visit sites in the evening. We're busy enough during the day without judging through the night as well. So if you've got those images, that's by far the best thing to do. Right, well, if I pass you now back to John. Is John there? Yeah, John is there. Yeah. So last slide, video and drone footage. If you can use video and drone footage, that's great. I mean, don't bust a gut to use it, but on certain categories, particularly 3MB, we will need it. But don't worry if you can't achieve video or drone footage. I mean, as I said before, I did have one project in Leicester Football Club that used time-lapse photography to indicate how time critical their project was, and they worked 24 hours a day to achieve the end result. And the time-lapse photography really told that story through all the different weathers they had to cope with, and it helped to sell that scheme to win an award. So don't underestimate it, but don't worry if you can't achieve video or drone footage. Thanks very much.
Okay, thank you, Jason. On the importance of photography, Jason's obviously covered that. Often the period for submitting the submission packs in your entry falls quite awkwardly. So what we do allow is for additional photography to be submitted right the way up until the adjudication process and beyond into early September if necessary. So if you don't think that you've got those hero images, but you know that given another couple of months you would have them and have the ability to do that, please, you can submit additional photography right the way up, as I say, until early September. Preferably, it's a good idea to try and get them issued out, if possible, by the adjudication meeting, which is the end of August each year. So I'll touch base now on a few of the schemes that categories that aren't actually visited, but are still equally as important in their preparation. The affiliate exceptional services, again, these will, all the lists are detailed in the guidelines, but everything needs to be evidenced. So in this, obviously, you need the description of the products and the services, etc., and the other items here detailed here. But it's no good just referring to a third-party accreditation without submitting evidence that that third-party accreditation exists. You don't have to submit a complete, War and Peace on it, but you must show that you actually have got third-party accreditation as appropriate. The examples of your products, again, don't need massive sales literature. We just need an overview of what your products and services you're providing throughout the industry and to your customers. It's not a heavy sell to the judges. It's basically a succinct category of what service and or products that you supply. Evidence how you interact with the Bali network of the contractors, how you support regional events, etc. Again, all this is crucial to actually making a decision. Evidence of how you're keeping abreast of the latest technology and information. And again, that would have been critical in this last 12 months. You probably found new ways of operating, because of COVID that you didn't know existed before, and it probably has altered the way that you approach your client base and your customers. And then there's any specialist training, etc., that you can provide or that you require and can offer. Again, package this all up. Succinct information. Don't go for padding. Don't go for marketing speak. Keep it simple, keep it plain, and keep it factual, and evidence it. Evidence, evidence, evidence. So we'll move on to the next slide, Emily. This is the affiliate exceptional services, and these are the items, obviously, that need to be included. Again, engage with your staff as well. Bring them, make them involved as part of the whole submission process. But clearly, details of any initiatives that you've got, evidence of working alongside Bali members, as I alluded to before. Samples of PR about your company, products and services. Again, just keep it succinct, keep it factual, succinct. And then if you do any charitable activities, then beat the drum and tell us about it. So we'll move on to the next slide. This is the snapshot of the judging sheet. Now, unlike the other categories, these are scored. And this is the score lines you'll see here on the screen. What the scores can be, and basically your judge, having gone through your submission pack, will score you against these items. And then that will outturn a total sum, and it will be the person with the highest total that wins that category. So clear evidence is required. If a judge is uncertain about what to award, we do allow and encourage the judges to talk to other fellow judges and to myself and ensure that the marking for that particular item that is correct. So if they're in any doubt as to whether you have got sufficient evidence there or your evidence is clear enough, we do bounce ideas off fellow judges so that we actually come up with a reasoned answer and a fair score at the end of it. And on to the next slide, Emily, please. So again, the employer's excellence is very similar in some of the requirements, so I won't bore you with it, but it's obviously very specific to the employers. It's demonstrating how the employer's excellence varies and how they've improved coming through the years. And this will be a succinct statement as to why your company be honoured with this award. Now that seems obvious, but often the employer will be going off piece, quite honestly. He will be banging on about the company and not about what it actually means for the company to be honoured with the Employer Excellence Award. So don't fall into that trap when you're doing this. Don't go telling me how great the company is and you as an employer is, but what does it mean to you and to your company for being awarded this thing? It's a completely different question. So just think that one through before you actually do your submission. Obviously, your work-life balances, etc. These are all part and parcel of your submission pack. Clear company vision and mission statement. Again, not management speak. Keep it simple, keep it factual. Recruitment induction processes and all these, I mean, a lot of these don't have to be vast. The bigger companies will have massive handbooks, etc. Your handbook can be massive or it can be 1 or 2 pages. It doesn't really matter as long as it's what you do as an organization and as individuals. And this is important. Don't pad it out. It doesn't matter if it's 1 page, as long as it's factual and succinct, or 100 pages. It really doesn't matter. It won't gain you any more points for having a bigger handbook than a small organisation. Obviously, your careers progression needs to all these items clearly defined and clearly laid out in the document. Don't make the judge hunt round pages through pages trying to find this information. Lay it out in a logical manner, and if you follow this template through, then it's a good checklist if nothing else. But don't roll 2 or 3 items into one. Make sure they stand out as individual paragraphs or pages in their own right. And then we go on to the next slide, Emily, please. And again, here, as previously, you've got a scoring matrix, and again, it varies from the affiliates for obvious reasons, but the requirements that we've gone through previously are all required, and then they're scored, and out of that will come a total score. And again, very similar. If the judge is uncertain that you've submitted sufficient evidence of one item or another, then again he can refer and does refer either to myself as chair or to a fellow judge for a second opinion. So we're comfortable at the end that the scores that are given are a fair reflection of the submission. So on to the next slide, Emily. And this is where I hand you back to Emily for organising the question and answer sessions. I thank you very much for your time this afternoon. I do hope you get behind the awards. I hope the process is a little bit easier for you this year than last year. Any of those that were working from home and couldn't pull together a submission for obvious reasons, I hope that by extending the the catchment for the practical completion. It will enable you hopefully to pull in some really interesting schemes and submit them to us at the appropriate time. So back to you, Emily.
Thanks, John, and thank you, Jason, as well, for your insight. But yeah, John, if you wouldn't mind popping up as well, because we've had a couple of we've had a question come in, and I think both yourself and Jason would be able to give some really good insight here. So just to remind everyone, if you've got any questions that you want to ask, now's the time to do so. You can do that through the question area that's on the screen for you, and we'll work through them. So the first one we've got here is what consideration is taken to the length of time planting has been in place. So they're saying in some of the images the planting appears to be quite full for a scheme, but given that it's only a year old, what consideration do you as judges take towards that? Oh, sorry, Jason, I think you're just muted.
Yeah, there we go. So yeah, I mean it's a hot potato, this one, as far as I'm concerned. But in terms of planting, I mean the timescale for the projects to be submitted give you 12 months from practical completion. So what we need to look at is the intent of the planting. So obviously, depending on the scope of the project, I mean, there'll be some schemes where the budget's been particularly large and therefore there's a lot of specimen planting gone in, or it's been planted particularly tight, which will make the garden look a lot fuller. But if the budget doesn't allow that and the plants are a little bit spaced out, a little bit more, perhaps not so many specimens, then what we've got to do is look at the planting plans, look at the scope of the scheme, the intent of the scheme, the aesthetics, look at the style of the planting, and then we'll look at that and say, right, well, actually, we can see in 3 or 4 years' time, that will work. That's going to fill out, that's going to achieve what the design set out to achieve. So, we're not looking at it and thinking, well, it looks a bit thin, therefore we're not, we can't award that anything because it doesn't look very good, as opposed to a scheme that's very full of planting. Equally, if it's very full and only been planted a year, we might think, well, actually, it's perhaps a bit overplanted, and might kind of look at that in a slightly different light. So providing the intent of the scheme as set out and as designed, we can see that that's achievable and will be achieved, then whether it looks a bit sparse or full, we'll take that into consideration.
Yeah, I'll just echo that. A scheme that's been planted with P9 plants as opposed to a specimen, a P9 could be planted extremely well, and a specimen could be planted extremely poorly, too deep, not pruned, etc. So it's, as Jason says, it's the design intent, it's the quality of the installation, and we then take your budget into account. A low budget scheme can still be done to a very high standard, and it just won't be as mature. But that's why we encourage and allow additional photographs to be submitted. So a scheme that's viewed in June, late June, early July, could be a completely different scheme if it were viewed at the end of August. So photograph it up, submit the photographs, they will be taken into account. But it is the quality of the installation. That's the key, the quality. Budgets vary, and it's not always the big budget jobs that come to the fore. So quality of the scheme, quality of the plant material, quality of workmanship, that's really the key.
Yeah, I think it's really good points that you've made there. I think in particular, the being able to submit additional photographs after you've entered the scheme. We always find that, a few months down the line, the images that we receive can look so different to the ones that are initially included in the submission pack. So yeah, you do have till October to be able to do that. So don't worry too much about that. And the judges, obviously, the experience, they can envisage how it will look based on kind of what they've got in front of them. But a really good question to consider. Another one we've had in as well is if you have got anything as judges, any further insight to add about, in particular, the grounds maintenance categories and the requirements for those, anything that they should be including additionally or instead of into their their entry and their submission.
I'll start with that one. Often it really needs a red line drawing coming in to actually capture exactly what area of the site that you're actually in charge of. Make sure that the boundary of your site and the boundary of your scope of works is very, very clearly defined. That's sounds obvious, but actually if you bleed into the neighbour's scheme on a business park or something, and you're not responsible for that, then it can be misinterpreted if you're not clear. So make sure that they're clearly defined. Present the scheme, get the scheme up to scratch, make sure that the scheme is looking good, make sure that your stripes are in the grass, etc., and your edges are done. Also look skyward. If your scope of work is for maintaining trees and it's clearly defined in your scope of works, and you're on an inner city site and you have not been maintaining those trees, then it will be noted at when the inspection takes place. So make sure that your scope of work is clearly defined, that the works on site reflect that scope of works, and that you are engaged and delivering those to the highest possible standard. And don't worry, if we've got a drought situation or a very windy day before the site visit, the judges are all experienced people. They're all from the industry, and they will all make due allowances for the storm that happened the night before the inspection, or the drought that happened, or the irrigation system that fell over a week before the inspection. They will make due allowances for it, but make sure that your scope is clearly defined. That's the key. The boundary of the site clearly defined, and make sure that you've implemented your specification. That's key. Anything further to add, Jason?
Well, no, it's right. I missed the question because all my phones were kicking off, so I was trying to switch them all off.
Well, we'll move on to next one. So the next question is about the list of criteria that we're given. So, for example, one of the criteria was about environmental factors, and what this person is asking is what happens if that was not part of the brief or scope for the job. Is that taken into account?
Yes, it is. Yeah, I mean, if some of the factors aren't relevant to your scheme, then we ignore them. And that goes for any of the categories that we've got in the judging criteria. If they're not relevant to that particular project, then if there's nothing there to judge, then we can't judge it. So if it's not relevant, it's not relevant.
Yeah,
absolutely, completely agree. This is where it comes down to the clear scope. Your scope of works and your explanation as to what was involved is crucial. And if there's no environmental enhancement or benefit to your scheme or the way you undertake it, you won't be marked down against it. It's the factor that's how you engage, that's how you were employed. However, if you've used a magnified deer for reducing the number of lorry visits into a site, you've used a barge on a canal, for instance, for delivering product, that you bang on about it. Tell us about it, because it makes a difference. It's not so much that you'll be judged against it, it's just that you're thinking a little bit outside the box. And that's the key. Sell yourself to the judging team and the judging panels.
Perfect. Well, that's all the questions that we've had in. So I think you guys have been wonderful presenters. We've not had too many of them through, but obviously there is ample opportunity throughout the whole entry process for you to come to myself directly initially with any questions that you have or any questions that crop up. If I can't answer them there and then I will take them to the judges and they can clarify any aspects, and I can come back to you on those. But this question section will be downloadable for you to be able to review the answers that have been given. So I just wanted to really now take the time to to thank John and Jason for taking part, for providing their insight. And I know I'm certainly looking forward, as I'm sure John and Jason are, to seeing those entries coming in. As I mentioned earlier, any questions, just get in touch, be able to help. And just a final point to note from me, really, about this year's ceremony. So it will be taking place on the 3rd of December at Grosvenor House in London. So pencil the date in the diary. I know I'm not the only one who's probably going to be looking forward to celebrating with everyone again. But that's really it from us at this stage. Thank you very, very much for your time, and take care. And we look forward to seeing your entries come in due course.